The Fitness Journey. Part 1. The Discovery. Chapter 1. Shattered Illusions. Cassie had always considered herself a realist. She wasn't one to romanticize her life or put her relationship on a pedestal, but when it came to her marriage with Ethan, she truly believed they had something solid. Their bond had been built over years of shared experiences, challenges, and intimate moments. Sure, there had been difficult times, arguments over finances, occasional cold shoulders after disagreements, but she saw these as normal bumps in the road. In her mind, they always came back stronger, more connected, and more committed to making it work. That was why, on that ordinary Saturday afternoon, she had no reason to suspect that her life was about to change forever. The sun was shining through the kitchen window as Cassie set her shopping bags down on the counter. She had spent the morning running errands, groceries, a quick stop at the dry cleaners, and picking up a birthday present for Ethan's niece. It had been an uneventful day, one where she allowed herself to move through her to-do list on autopilot. She had even hummed to herself as she walked through the door, the soft sound of water running upstairs signaling that Ethan was still in the shower. As she began unpacking the groceries, Cassie's eyes were drawn to a familiar buzzing noise. Ethan had left his phone on the counter, the screen lighting up with a message. She didn't think much of it at first. Ethan was always getting messages for work. He was in sales, and his phone buzzed constantly with clients, colleagues, and the occasional friend. But then, something caught her attention. The message wasn't from a colleague or a family member. The name on the screen was one she didn't recognize. Amanda. A slight unease settled in her chest, but she brushed it off. It was probably nothing. Maybe Amanda was a client, or a friend of a friend. But as she glanced down at the preview of the message, a sickening sensation twisted in her stomach. "Can't wait to see you again, love. Last night was amazing." Her hands stilled over the grocery bag she had been unpacking. For a moment it felt like the room had tilted on its axis, and she couldn't quite catch her breath. Her heart began to race, the words of the message burning in her mind. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night. Amazing." Cassie's thoughts whirled in confusion, disbelief battling with the growing dread in her chest. She wasn't the kind of woman to snoop through her husband's phone, but something inside her, something raw and instinctual, compelled her to reach for it. Her hand shook as she unlocked the phone, her mind racing through every possible scenario that could explain the message away. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe this Amanda had the wrong number. But the truth lay waiting for her just beyond that screen. And once she swiped up, there was no going back. The message thread opened, and there it was. A string of texts between Ethan and Amanda, each one more intimate, more damning than the last. "Last night was incredible. I can still feel your hands on me. I miss you already. Wish I could wake up next to you every morning. Can't wait for our next trip. Let's make it longer this time." Tears welled up in Cassie's eyes, blurring the screen as she scrolled through the endless string of betrayals, photos, hotel reservations, plans for future meetups. All of it confirming the truth she had been too terrified to admit. Ethan had been cheating on her. A sob caught in her throat, but she swallowed it down, her fingers trembling as she set the phone down on the counter. It felt like someone had knocked the air out of her lungs, and she collapsed into the nearest chair, staring blankly at the kitchen wall. How? How could this have happened? How could he betray her like this, after everything they'd been through? Cassie's mind raced through the memories of their life together. The nights spent laughing over dinner, the vacations, the whispered "I love yous" in the dark. She had always trusted him implicitly, never questioning where he was or who he was with. Now that trust was shattered, irreparable. The sound of the water shutting off upstairs snapped her out of her daze. Ethan. He was still here, still oblivious to the bomb that had just exploded in their marriage. A mixture of rage, heartbreak, and a desperate need for answers rose inside her, swelling until it was all she could feel. Seconds later, she heard the soft thud of footsteps coming down the stairs, and then Ethan appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a towel, drying his hair with another. He smiled when he saw her, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. "So, hey, babe," he said casually, tossing the towel over his shoulder. "Did you get everything done?" Cassie's eyes locked on to him, her mind replaying the words she had just read over and over again. She couldn't hold it in any longer. "Who's Amanda?" Her voice came out sharper than she intended, laced with an edge that made Ethan freeze mid-step. His eyes flickered with confusion, then something else, a flash of panic, quickly masked. "What?" he asked, forcing a laugh. "What are you talking about?" Cassie stood up, her hands shaking as she picked up his phone from the counter and held it out to him. "This," she said, her voice trembling. "Amanda, the messages, the photos. Who is she, Ethan?" The color drained from his face as he looked at the phone, and for a moment he didn't say anything. Cassie could see the gears turning in his head as he searched for an explanation, but none came. Instead, his shoulders slumped, and he let out a long breath. "I can explain," he said, his voice barely a whisper. But Cassie didn't want his excuses. She didn't want to hear whatever half-truths he had prepared to justify his betrayal. The pain in her chest was overwhelming, an ache that spread through her entire body as she stared at the man she thought she knew. "Explain?" she repeated, her voice breaking. "How do you explain this, Ethan? You've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back. How could you do this?" Ethan looked down at the floor, unable to meet her gaze. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." Cassie let out a bitter laugh, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Wasn't supposed to happen like this? You've been cheating on me for God knows how long, and you're sorry it didn't go the way you planned?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, guilt etched across his face. "I never meant to hurt you, Cass. It just happened. It just happened." Cassie's voice rose, her heartbreak turning to anger. "You don't accidentally fall into an affair, Ethan. You made a choice. You chose to betray me." For the first time since she had seen that message, the weight of it all came crashing down on her. This wasn't some misunderstanding or mistake. This was deliberate. Ethan had chosen Amanda over her, again and again. Cassie shook her head, stepping back from him as if the distance could somehow make the pain less real. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't. I need to think." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Ethan standing there, his guilty silence hanging in the air. As she made her way upstairs, Cassie felt like a stranger in her own home, the life she had known slipping through her fingers like sand. Chapter 2. The decision, the days following Cassie's discovery of Ethan's betrayal, were a blur of heartache. She alternated between moments of disbelief, anger, and deep sadness. It felt like her world had come crashing down, and she didn't know how to piece it back together. Every time she thought about Ethan's affair, a fresh wave of pain swept over her. The life she had envisioned, the future she had worked for, now seemed like a distant dream shattered by his infidelity. She spent most of her time in bed, barely eating, barely sleeping, replaying the moment she had confronted Ethan over and over in her mind. His hollow apologies, his refusal to meet her gaze, it all gnawed at her, filling her with both rage and helplessness. What was she supposed to do now? Where could she even begin to pick up the pieces of her broken life? On the third night, after another argument with Ethan that ended with him leaving the house to clear his head, Cassie found herself sitting in their dark living room. The only light came from the soft glow of her phone screen. She had spent hours crying that day, her eyes swollen and her chest tight with an ache she couldn't escape. The house felt cold, suffocating even, with reminders of Ethan everywhere. The framed wedding photos, the vacation souvenirs, the shared furniture that suddenly felt foreign. Her mind drifted, and before she realized it, her fingers were mindlessly scrolling through her social media feed. She had avoided it for days, not wanting to see the happy, carefree lives of her friends or the photos of seemingly perfect relationships that would only make her feel worse. But tonight, she couldn't resist. The steady rhythm of swiping was almost hypnotic, a brief escape from the whirlwind of her emotions. That was when she stumbled across a video that caught her attention. It was a fitness transformation video, one of those before and after montages where a woman chronicled her journey from heartbreak to empowerment. In the video, the woman, about Cassie's age, stood in front of the camera, raw and vulnerable. She spoke about her painful divorce, about how she had felt completely lost after discovering her husband's affair. Cassie's heart tightened as she watched, resonating deeply with the woman's story. But then the tone shifted. The woman spoke about how she had decided not to let the betrayal define her. Instead, she had chosen to channel her pain into something positive, into fitness. She began working out regularly, not just to change her body, but to regain control of her life. Over the course of months, she transformed both physically and emotionally, becoming stronger in every sense of the word. As the video transitioned to clips of the woman lifting weights, running, and boxing, Cassie felt something stir inside her. The woman's final words echoed in her mind. "I didn't do this for him. I did this for me. To prove that I'm stronger than the pain." Cassie closed the app and sat in silence, the weight of her emotions still heavy on her chest. She glanced at the mirror on the opposite wall, and for the first time in days, really looked at herself. What she saw took her breath away. Her reflection didn't show the woman she thought she was. Instead, the face staring back at her was someone she barely recognized, tired, puffy from crying, and utterly defeated. Her skin was pale, her eyes red and swollen, and her hair hung limply around her face. She had always prided herself on looking put together, but now she looked as broken as she felt. But it wasn't just her face. She stood up slowly, walking toward the mirror, and took in the rest of her body. She had always been a little soft around the edges, but over the years, she had let herself go. It was gradual, almost unnoticeable at first, but now the signs were clear. She had poured so much of herself into maintaining her marriage, into supporting Ethan's career, that she had neglected her own health and well-being. She had allowed herself to fade into the background, to become invisible in her own life. Cassie wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold back the flood of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her once again. She thought back to the woman in the video, how she had taken control of her life, how she had used fitness to transform her pain into power. Could she do the same? Could she really take back control after everything she had been through? For the first time since finding out about Ethan's affair, Cassie felt a flicker of something other than sorrow. It wasn't hope, exactly, but a spark of resilience, small and fragile, but undeniable. She couldn't change what Ethan had done. She couldn't erase the betrayal or undo the heartbreak. But there was one thing she could change: herself. She wasn't going to let this break her. Taking a deep breath, Cassie wiped the tears from her eyes and stood a little straighter. Enough was enough. She was done feeling sorry for herself. Done letting Ethan's choices define her. If he didn't see her worth, then she would find it for herself. The decision was made in that quiet moment, standing alone in the dim living room. It wasn't dramatic or flashy. There was no grand declaration, no outward sign that her life was about to shift. But deep inside, something clicked. Cassie was going to rebuild her life, starting with her body. She had never been one for working out. She would always come up with excuses or say she was too busy. But now, she felt like it was the one thing she could control in the midst of all this chaos. She could take charge of her health, of her strength, and transform the way she felt about herself. It wasn't about Ethan anymore. This was about her. Cassie grabbed her phone again, searching through fitness apps and videos, her heart pounding with a sense of nervous excitement. She didn't know where this journey would take her, or how long it would take to feel like herself again. But she knew she had to start somewhere. As she downloaded a beginner workout app and bookmarked a series of motivational videos, she made a promise to herself. This time, she wasn't doing it to please anyone else, not to fit into a certain mold or to be someone's perfect wife. She was doing it for her, for the woman she wanted to become, for the strength she knew she still had inside her. The pain of Ethan's betrayal would not define her. She would rise above it, stronger than before. Tomorrow, she would begin. Chapter 3. Small steps, big changes. The next morning, Cassie woke up to the sound of her alarm, a noise that felt more like a signal for change than just a way to start the day. She stretched in bed, feeling a twinge of tiredness that had become all too familiar over the last few weeks of emotional turmoil. But today felt different. Today, she had a purpose. After a quick breakfast and putting on an old pair of leggings and a loose tank top, she headed to the local gym. It had been years since she set foot in one, and as she walked through the entrance, the familiar scent of rubber mats and the hum of exercise machines made her heart race with anticipation. She signed up for a membership, hesitating slightly as she handed over her credit card. This wasn't just a financial commitment. It was a commitment to herself, to change. Her first workout was nothing short of humbling. Cassie had chosen a beginner's class, thinking it would be manageable, but by the end of the warm-up, her legs felt like jelly, and she was gasping for air. Every lunge, every squat, felt like it was pushing her to the brink. Her muscles screamed in protest, and by the time the class was over, she was drenched in sweat and barely able to walk. As she left the gym, her body aching and her legs trembling, she felt a strange mixture of defeat and pride. She had pushed herself harder than she had in years. Despite the soreness, there was something invigorating about it. Each drop of sweat, each strained muscle felt like a symbol of her reclaiming her strength. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, too. Every step she took was one step further from the heartbreak, from Ethan's betrayal, and toward a new version of herself. The next few weeks were grueling. Her body was sore every morning, her muscles aching in ways she didn't think possible. There were moments when she wanted to quit, when the idea of lying in bed and letting the pain of betrayal consume her seemed far easier than pushing through another set of burpees or running another mile on the treadmill. But each time she was tempted to give up, Cassie reminded herself why she had started in the first place. She wasn't doing this for anyone else. She was doing it for her, for the woman she wanted to become, for the life she wanted to reclaim. Gradually, the pain began to feel less like punishment and more like progress. The soreness became a badge of honor, proof that she was pushing herself. She started lifting heavier weights, running faster, and holding planks for longer. With each small victory, her confidence grew. As Cassie's body began to change, so did her mind. The gym became her sanctuary, a place where she could focus on nothing but herself, where the worries and heartache of her failed marriage couldn't touch her. The mirror, once her enemy, now became her motivator. Every time she looked at herself, she saw the pounds melting away, but more importantly, she saw the emotional weight lifting. Slowly but surely, the grief and betrayal that had once consumed her started to loosen its grip. But Cassie knew that true transformation wasn't just about physical fitness. She needed to work on her mind, too. After her workouts, she would spend time meditating, learning to quiet the noise in her head. She downloaded self-help books and podcasts, filling her days with positivity and motivation. She wanted to heal, not just on the outside, but on the inside as well. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about showing Ethan what he had lost or proving herself to anyone. It was about Cassie finding her own strength, her own power. And with each passing day, she felt herself growing stronger, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Chapter 4. A New Purpose. 6 months into her fitness journey, Cassie barely recognized the woman she had become. Her body was leaner, her muscles more defined, and her stamina was something she could only dream of when she first started. She no longer dreaded her workouts. In fact, she looked forward to them. The gym was still her sanctuary, but now it was also her playground, a place where she felt in control and confident. But it wasn't just her body that had changed. Cassie's mindset had transformed in ways she hadn't anticipated. The fog of betrayal that had clouded her thoughts for months had lifted, replaced with a clear sense of purpose. She was no longer weighed down by the grief of her failed marriage. Instead, she was filled with a newfound determination to not only continue her own journey, but to help others find their strength, too. Cassie's friends began to notice the change in her. Her confidence was magnetic, her energy contagious. One afternoon, while catching up with her friend Olivia over coffee, the topic of fitness naturally came up. "I can't believe how great you look, Cassie," Olivia said, admiring her friend's toned arms and glowing skin. "What's your secret?" Cassie smiled. "There's no secret, really. Just consistency, a lot of hard work, and a lot of sweat." "Well, whatever you're doing, it's working," Olivia said, leaning in conspiratorially. "I've been thinking about getting in shape myself, but I have no idea where to start." That conversation sparked something in Cassie. Over the next few weeks, more of her friends reached out, asking for advice on workouts, healthy eating, and how to stay motivated. Cassie found herself spending hours creating simple workout plans for them, recommending meal ideas, and even meeting up for gym sessions. The more she helped, the more she realized how much she loved it. There was something incredibly rewarding about guiding others through their own fitness journeys, watching them push through their struggles and come out stronger on the other side. The idea came to her one evening as she sat in her living room, reflecting on how far she had come. What if this was her calling? What if helping others find their strength wasn't just a hobby, but a career? The thought filled her with excitement. and fear. It was a huge leap from where she had been, from the woman who had once felt lost and broken after her marriage crumbled. But now, she wasn't that woman anymore. She had transformed inside and out, and she wanted to help others do the same. Without hesitating, Cassie enrolled in a personal training certification program. The coursework was intense, requiring her to dive deep into anatomy, nutrition, and exercise science. But she loved every minute of it. It was as if all the pieces of her life were finally falling into place. She studied late into the night, practiced new training techniques at the gym, and eagerly soaked up every bit of knowledge she could. By the time she earned her certification, Cassie was brimming with confidence and ready to start her new chapter. She didn't waste any time. She reached out to her local community center and secured a spot to start offering fitness classes in the park. At first, only a few people showed up, mostly her friends and a handful of curious locals, but word quickly spread. Within a few months, her classes grew. Women of all ages, many of whom were going through their own struggles, started attending regularly. Cassie had created more than just a workout group. She had built a supportive, empowering community where people could come to not only improve their fitness but also find strength, resilience, and healing. Cassie didn't just teach them exercises. She shared her own story, opening up about the heartbreak that had led her to this point, how she had found strength in her weakest moment, and how fitness had saved her. It wasn't just about losing weight or toning muscles. It was about reclaiming your life, your confidence, your power. And for every person who attended her class, Cassie was more than just a trainer. She was a mentor, a role model, and a beacon of strength. The transformation was complete, but Cassie knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 5. Full Circle. The sun filtered through the trees in the park, casting a warm glow over the gathering crowd. Cassie stood at the edge of the event space, hands on her hips, surveying the scene with a mix of pride and anticipation. 2 years ago, she couldn't have imagined this moment, a day where she wasn't defined by the pain of her past, but by the strength she had found through it. The charity workout event was her brainchild, an idea that had come to her during one of her early morning runs. She wanted to give back, to help other women who had suffered and lost, just as she once had. The funds raised from the event would go toward local women's shelters, offering support and resources to those in need. It felt symbolic, as if everything she had been through had led her to this day. Cassie busied herself with last-minute checks, making sure everything was in place. Volunteers were setting up water stations, adjusting speakers, and helping participants find their spots on the grassy field. She could hear the excited buzz of conversation as more people arrived. The turnout was better than she had hoped. People of all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds, from total beginners to experienced fitness enthusiasts, had come to support the cause. As the start time approached, Cassie adjusted her headset and took a deep breath. Her heart was racing, not out of fear but exhilaration. She'd come so far from the woman who had first stepped into the gym, unsure of herself, and weighed down by grief. Now, she was the leader of a community, someone people looked up to for strength and inspiration. She was about to lead them through an intense workout, one that symbolized more than just physical effort. For many of the women attending, it was an act of reclaiming their power, just as it had been for her. Cassie climbed onto the small stage at the front, her eyes scanning the crowd, ready to begin. That's when she saw him, Ethan. He was standing at the edge of the crowd, near the back, as if unsure whether to stay or leave. His once confident posture seemed a little hunched, his face more lined than she remembered. He was wearing workout clothes, but there was something different about him. He looked smaller, diminished. It had been 2 years since they had last spoken, 2 years since the day she confronted him about his betrayal and walked away from the life they had built together. Cassie's heart gave a single quick jolt at the sight of him, but to her surprise it wasn't accompanied by pain. She didn't feel the familiar stab of heartbreak or anger that she had once associated with him. Instead, there was an overwhelming sense of calm. She had moved on, truly moved on. The woman she had become was stronger, wiser, and more at peace than she had ever been during their marriage. Ethan was a reminder of a past life, but he no longer held any power over her. For a moment, their eyes met. Ethan's face registered surprise, perhaps even a flicker of regret. But Cassie held his gaze with quiet confidence. She could see that he hadn't expected this, hadn't expected to see her leading a large fitness event, surrounded by people who admired and respected her. He had likely thought she would fade into the background, swallowed by the pain of their separation. But here she was, standing taller than ever. Cassie's smile was small but genuine. She turned her attention back to the crowd, raising her arms to signal the start of the workout. The music kicked in, a fast-paced beat that matched the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She led the group through stretches, her voice strong and encouraging as she guided them through the warm-up. Ethan stayed at the back, watching silently, but she paid him no mind. As the workout intensified, Cassie found herself fully immersed in the moment. She could feel the energy of the group, their determination and drive mirroring her own. This wasn't just about physical fitness. It was about pushing past limits, about proving to themselves that they were capable of more than they ever thought possible. Sweat dripped down her face, but she barely noticed. This was her element. She was in control, leading with confidence, and nothing could shake her. As the session drew to a close, Cassie brought the group into a cool-down stretch. The park was quiet now, save for the sound of deep breathing and the occasional shuffle of feet. She glanced again toward the back of the crowd. Ethan was still there, watching her, with an expression she couldn't quite read. Regret? Awe? It didn't matter. The cool-down ended, and Cassie removed her headset, thanking everyone for coming and reminding them of the importance of the cause they had supported today. Applause rippled through the crowd, and people began to disperse, chatting excitedly about the workout and the event. Ethan hadn't moved. Cassie could feel his eyes on her as she mingled with the participants, smiling and answering questions. Eventually, she made her way over to him, her steps steady and sure. "Cassie," he said, his voice softer than she remembered, almost hesitant. She tilted her head, offering him a polite but distant smile. "Ethan." For a moment they stood there in silence, the weight of the past hanging between them. Cassie could see that he was searching for the right words, maybe even an apology. But she didn't need one. She didn't need closure from him. She had found it within herself. "I didn't expect to see you here," he finally said, his eyes flicking to the stage where she had led the workout. "I didn't expect to see you either," she replied, her voice calm and even. There was a beat of awkward silence. Ethan shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable, as if he wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. Cassie felt no obligation to fill the silence. She had nothing to prove, nothing to say that hadn't already been said by the life she was now living. "You look great," he added, his voice tinged with something that might have been admiration or even regret. "Thank you," Cassie said simply. She could tell he wanted to say more, but she didn't need his approval or his validation. As the crowd continued to thin, Cassie glanced toward the stage, signaling that her attention was needed elsewhere. "I've got to finish up here," she said, not unkindly, but with finality. Ethan hesitated, as if searching for something else to hold on to, but eventually he nodded. "Right. Well, take care." Cassie gave him one last smile, a smile of true peace and closure, before turning away. She walked back toward the stage, her heart light, her mind clear. The chapter with Ethan had ended long ago, but today marked the final seal. She was free. Chapter 6: The Twist. The air was crisp with anticipation as Cassie led the class, her voice steady and powerful. Every movement was purposeful, each instruction clear as she guided the participants through a challenging workout. Her body moved with grace and strength, a testament to the years of hard work and personal growth. The crowd, a mix of regulars and newcomers, followed her lead, hanging on to her every word. Cassie was in her element, her confidence radiating from every pore. From the corner of her eye, she caught sight of Ethan again. He had shifted toward the back, attempting to follow along with the exercises. His movements were stiff, hesitant, and awkward. It was clear that he hadn't been keeping up with any sort of fitness routine. A small part of Cassie noticed the irony. Here he was, out of shape and struggling, while she had thrived. But there was no bitterness in her heart anymore. She had grown beyond that. The class wound down, the intensity gradually decreasing as Cassie led them into a cool down. Stretching her arms above her head, she glanced at Ethan again. He stood off to the side now, sweat beading on his forehead, his face flushed. There was hesitation in his stance, like he wasn't sure whether to leave or stay. As the session ended, people gathered around Cassie, thanking her for the workout and showering her with compliments. "You have such great energy, Cassie," one woman exclaimed. "You make these classes so much fun." Another added, "You've helped me so much, not just with fitness, but with my confidence." "Thank you." Cassie smiled at the words, accepting their praise with grace. She was proud of the community she had built, women and even men who found strength and healing through her classes. But as she basked in the positive energy of the group, she noticed Ethan still lingering in the background, looking out of place amidst the sea of happy faces. Curiosity tugged at her, and after finishing her conversations, she made her way over to him. Her steps were confident, her posture upright, exuding the self-assurance that had come from years of rebuilding her life. "Hey, Ethan," she greeted him with a calm smile, her voice as smooth as ever. There was no malice, no hidden resentment, just a serene confidence that came from having moved on. Ethan shifted uncomfortably on his feet, his eyes briefly meeting hers before flicking down to the ground. "Cassie, you look amazing," he stammered, his voice thick with a mix of surprise and uncertainty. I didn't expect to see you here. Like this." Cassie raised an eyebrow, amused but not swayed by his awkward compliment. "I didn't expect to see you either," she replied, shrugging lightly. "But life's full of surprises, right?" Ethan swallowed, his discomfort palpable. He seemed to struggle for the right words, clearly unprepared for the confident woman standing before him. I heard about what you've been doing, the classes, the events. You've really changed." "I have," Cassie said simply, her tone calm and measured. "It's been a long journey, but I'm proud of where I am now." There was a beat of silence, and for a moment it seemed as though Ethan might just turn and walk away. But instead he shifted again, his voice dropping to a quieter, almost vulnerable tone. "I've been going through some stuff, too. I could use a change. Things haven't exactly been great." Cassie studied him for a moment. The old version of her would have felt a flicker of satisfaction at seeing Ethan in this state, unsure, struggling, and perhaps even regretful. But that wasn't who she was anymore. She'd grown past the need for validation through his suffering. She wasn't here to relish in his downfall. Instead, she saw an opportunity, not to punish him, but to offer him the same chance she had given herself. Change had saved her, and maybe it could help him too. "You should join one of my classes sometime," she offered, her tone sincere but firm. "First class is on me." Ethan blinked, clearly taken aback by her offer. "You'd really do that?" he asked, disbelief coloring his words. Cassie smiled, though it was tinged with a kind of finality. "Of course. Everyone deserves a chance to start over." For a moment, Ethan just stared at her, as though trying to process the generosity behind her words. But Cassie wasn't waiting for his response. She had offered him the gift of change. What he did with it was up to him. With a nod of farewell, she turned and walked away, her heart light and her mind clear. As she made her way back to the crowd, Ethan's presence faded into the background. He was a part of her past, but he no longer held any weight in her life. Cassie had moved on, and her focus was on the future, a future that she had built with her own strength, perseverance, and self-respect. She didn't need his regret. She didn't need his approval. She had found closure within herself, and that was more than enough. Part 4. Moving Forward. Chapter 7. A New Beginning. The success of the charity event was just the beginning of a new chapter for Cassie. Her fitness business continued to grow, expanding into online programs and reaching people far beyond her local community. The demand for her classes skyrocketed, with women and men from all walks of life seeking her out not just for fitness, but for the mental and emotional strength she embodied. Cassie's journey had become a symbol of resilience and transformation. She wasn't just a personal trainer. She was a beacon of hope for others who had faced heartbreak and betrayal. Her classes became more than just workouts. They became a space for healing, empowerment, and community. Women shared their stories, supported one another, and found strength in their shared experiences. Cassie found peace in helping others, particularly women who had been through similar hardships. Her success wasn't measured by the number of clients she had or the money she made, but by the lives she touched. Each person who came to her class left feeling stronger, more confident, and more in control of their own destiny. As for Ethan, he did show up for that free class, just as Cassie had offered. He joined the group, trying his best to keep up with the pace, but Cassie maintained her professional boundaries. She treated him as she would any other participant, kind, supportive, but distant. There was no need for closure beyond what she had already found. Her life had moved forward, and she wasn't looking back. Cassie had learned the most important lesson of all. True strength doesn't come from holding on to pain or seeking revenge. It comes from letting go, finding peace within yourself, and using your past to fuel something better. And that's exactly what she had done. Her story wasn't about the man who had betrayed her. It was about the woman she had become, the woman who had turned her pain into power, her heartbreak into healing, and her struggle into success. And as she looked toward the future, Cassie knew one thing for certain. She was just getting started.